Bob Marley said the day you stop racing is the day you win the race. He's not saying give up, he's saying give up the chase.
Wisdom is this special power that we can access to see the unseen, to speak the unspoken, to touch the intangible.
Wisdom is something that we can't afford to live without because it is the ability to see within. What up, y'all? I'm Spence for Hire. Welcome to the Daily Bar Podcast, episode 2. For the past 2 months, May and June, I've been hitting y'all on my social media with bars. Just 2-line rhymes of some wisdom to boost your day, to maybe give you some positivity, to give you some motivation, inspiration, even transformation. Wisdom does all of those things, and I prefer to do it through the rhyme format, Then every first Friday, we take some of those bars or one of those bars and we break them down right here on the podcast. All right, so you need my social media to work in tandem wherever you consume these podcasts. So make sure you follow me at Spence_4 HIRE, and you can get the whole Daily Bar experience. All right, let's get into it. Bob Marley said the day you stop racing is the day you win the race. He's not saying give up. He's saying give up the chase. I love this quote so much because it's not saying that we shouldn't have dreams, desire, dedication, determination. No. All of that is good and we should have that. But what it is asking, though, is what is at the finish line? If life is a race, what is at the finish line and where? Where is the finish line? Because that determines whether our race is in vain or whether we're truly going somewhere or not. So by asking what is at the finish line and where is the finish line is basically asking what is your definition of success. If you've never defined for yourself what success is, chances are you have probably just defaulted to what society or what culture has told you success is. And normally those definitions of success are geared around numbers. High numbers of income, high numbers of likes or followers, or smaller numbers on the scale. And so our life, our race, becomes a chase because as long as success is being defined for us, we don't get to determine when we've achieved it. Another one of our bars from earlier in the month said it this way: if I live my life by a definition of success that isn't mine, that's like running on a treadmill at a marathon expecting to cross the finish line. Until we define what success is for us, we'll never have a strong sense of gain. And the strong sense of gain is where joy and peace and achievement and a sense of self-value, all of that comes from a sense of gain. All that we've gained, all that we've achieved, a sense of contentment, a sense of not a rival, but a sense of gaining along the way. And until we have that mentality, we're living in the opposite. We're living in what Dan Sullivan calls the gap. If we're not living in the mentality of what we've gained, we're living in what he calls the gap. Another one of our bars from earlier in the month describes it like this: there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. But living in that gap robs you of the gain you've achieved. If our life and our mentality about our life is focused on all that we don't have, or all that we haven't achieved, the levels we haven't reached yet, the successes that we haven't checked off, or the goals that we haven't reached, if we live with our mind in that gap, we're living an empty life. Think about a gap. It's a space. It's emptiness. And when we live in that emptiness, we're robbing ourselves of a life of fullness from all that we've actually achieved. We're just living a life of emptiness when our focus is in the space between the gap of our reality and our ideals. Trying to live by ideals is like a desert horizon. The more we keep moving, it keeps moving, and we're never arriving. And here's another challenge. If we define what success looks like for us, we lose that the moment we compare ourselves to somebody else's definition of success, the moment we compare ourselves to somebody else. When we do that, now we're not only living in the gap of emptiness and not the fullness of our gain, we now no longer have control of how wide that gap is. What we do have control over, however, is the choice to live in the gaps that we've closed into gains. Before, there was probably a gap of isolation in your life, and maybe you closed it now by having a family. Maybe there was the gap of having unfinished schooling, but now there's the gain of a GED, a diploma, or a degree. Maybe there was the gap before of a broken bank account, but now you've closed that gap by having a new job. When you look at how truly successful you really are, that puts you in a gain mentality, and it actually compels you to want to gain more. And you should want to achieve more. You should be compelled to want to aspire to do more and to be more, but you're only truly going to be able to do those things when you are at your best. And you're only at your best when you are in the gain mentality. If you're in the gap mentality, you are never really going to appreciate all that you've done, and it's going to keep you in a place of just a dissatisfaction of where you haven't gone yet, the things you haven't achieved yet, the goals you haven't succeeded in. And by all means, as far as comparing yourself to others, you absolutely should be comparing yourself to someone, as long as that someone is always you. You don't need to be anything else but your best today. And don't try to compare yourself to anyone else except who you were yesterday. Let me ask you some questions. Listen, what is a gain that you have achieved in your life recently? Whether it's last week, 6 months ago, maybe a year, doesn't matter. And I know I'm gonna sound like Yoda when I say this, but there's no big or small. There's only you've gained or you're working on it. What is a gain that you have achieved or that you're working on right now in your life? What is a gap that you keep falling into? Where are you experiencing emptiness or dissatisfaction with your life because you keep staring into the gap of what you don't have yet, or where you haven't arrived at yet, or what you haven't accomplished yet, or the levels up that you're still staring way up at and they seem too far? Where are they holding you back from having a sense of gain? What gaps do you continually fall into? One that's very important. What is your definition of success? Have you defined it for yourself? What does a successful life look like for you? If you have to listen to these questions over again or scroll back and write them down, please do it and please answer them, because you are probably not giving yourself enough credit for the gains that you actually have, and it's holding you back from being your best and from gaining more. The day you stop racing is the day you win the race. He's not saying give up. He's saying give up the chase. I'm going to put the Audible link for the book, The Gap in the Game by Dan Sullivan, in the details of this podcast today. I'm always going to send you guys the Audible link. When you see me, if I got my Beats or my AirPods in, I'm telling you 6 times out of 10, I'm not listening to music, I'm listening to a book. I'm constantly trying to take in wisdom, and that's what I want to supply y'all with, is the wisdom. And I recommend Audible because I know how hard it is in a fast-paced world to stop and read. So take in the wisdom while you're walking the dog, while you're working out, while you're trying to tune out somebody you don't want to listen to. All right, please check that out, The Gap in the Game. There's a lot of wisdom in there about what we've been talking about today. Make sure you check it out. The Daily Bar Podcast is always going to aspire to bring you wisdom. Wisdom is going to help you set a high bar, and this podcast is going to help you set a high bar in your mind and keep it there with a rhyme. If you enjoy this podcast, please rate it. Please share it. If you're watching the YouTube version, subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody who could always use some wisdom. Thank you all for checking it out. Remember, make sure you follow me on my social medias, Spence_4 HIRE. I'm going to catch y'all on the next podcast episode. All right, peace. For more content, original music, and speaking and coaching services, hit me up at my website, Spence4h.com.